Hello and very warm welcome. Today we will be discussing our history, modern history test, and there are 10 questions, but we will try to have a discussion on 5 to 6 questions. Maybe we will discuss those 5 6 questions. Uh, Let people join. Good evening, Musharraf. So let's begin our discussion, and let's see. People will join later, I guess. Fine. So this was the first question that we have to discuss. This is with respect to clarify how this mid 18th century India was beset the specter of the fragmented polity. So here we have to discuss how it was a fragmented polity. Mainly we will be discussing about the after death of Aurangzeb, what was the condition. So you can see here the British, along with, now we have to give very crisp this introduction for this particular question. The British, along with the Western colonial powers, were able to establish themselves around 1600 AD as traders. So first they were traders. We have what we have done in this particular introduction is we have transformed the rule or transformed the role or the role which was played by these companies from traders to rulers, right? From traders to rulers. So the British, along with Western colonial powers, other powers, for example, we are talking about French also, were able to establish themselves around 1600 AD as traders. History has time and again proved that an external power can successfully invade only when there is a weak internal polity in the region. So they, from traders, they started this capturing territories, etc., and then finally they became rulers, right? Finally they became rulers in the sense of colonial power, so or imperial power which colonized India. So this is how the role has transformed, and this glimpse we tried into our introduction. So this is our introduction, and this is how we tried giving the glimpse of this idea that they were traders, and finally, because of the internal weak internal polity in the region, they invaded and they took advantage of it, right? So this is the idea. Is audio video fine? Can we move ahead? Please let me know if any issue is there, and if with respect to any technical aspect, audio or video, right? Now let's discuss the answer of this question. This was the part with respect to Now let's discuss. We in with this particular question we have to answer. In this particular question we have to answer what was the condition, how it was a fragmented polity, right? Is this specter of a fragmented polity in mid 18th century. So we have to discuss how it was a fragmented polity. Before the British, India was last united in terms of political rule during the reign of Aurangzeb in the late 17th and beginning of the 18th century, right? So we have given this idea because this question is asking about fragmented polity. So first we will be talking about this complete unit, and this India was a united territory, and after that what happened, that they started becoming fragmented, right? So many regional powers emerged. This is the main idea of this particular question, right? We have to give idea of these regional powers. Now to give idea of these regional powers, in the first opening statement we have said that India was last united. Before this fragmentation, India was united during the reign of Aurangzeb till in the late 17th and beginning of 18th century, right? So this is the basic idea. After his death, independent judiciaries and Nawabs started to rebel, and they started forming their regional powers, right? Regional powers. Let's understand the regional powers, how it emerged. So first let's talk about Mughal Empire, how it declined. Already we have seen in the one of the question discussion where how it declined, and we have discussed the entire question, but that particular details are not required here. The once mighty Mughal Empire was in a state of disintegration, losing central authority and fragmented into smaller princely states. So this is how we have described this particular state, right? Mughal started declining. So this is the decline of Mughal that we can see here. Now the question is not about decline of Mughal. Please understand. I have seen some of the answers where people have all started giving the reason of decline in Mughal power. The question is not about Mughals. The question is about the fragmented polity. So we have to discuss more about the states or the confederations or the territories which the regional powers that emerge. We don't have to discuss the decline of Mughal. So one line is sufficient. You can write one line, but not explaining this entire decline of Mughal is not needed, right? So decline of Mughal completely is not needed here. What we need exactly is the emergence of regional powers, right? Emergence of regional power is needed and not the decline of Mughal power. Now let's see how we can discuss the regional power. So first regional power, Sikh Confederacy. Regional powers emergence, right? Emergence of regional power. Various regional powers emerged as successor state challenging the Mughal authority, right? And see, the first that we can discuss about Sikh Confederacy. Now, since I have not prepared by writing, so you can understand that we will not be writing in this particular manner in the answer sheet. We will be writing like this, maybe regional power emergence. So we will draw this heading or regional power emergence, or for that matter I can explain it here. We can write like this: regional power emergence, regional power, regional power emergence. And what we can do here is like this, we can prepare, and here we can write about Punjab, here we can write about Bengal, right? Here we can write about Marathas also, right? This is how we can start preparing, this is how the representation will be, right? So representation, I hope we why I have done this, because we have practiced enough number of questions. I have already provided you enough number of handwritten answers, that how you have to write in the examination, what shall be our presentation in the answer sheet, right? So this you understand, that's why I am not going into the details of it, and just we are focusing on what has to be written. Now when we are presenting in that manner, we are not going into writing like this, not in these statements, right? We are just overlooking the kind of grammar that is needed, and we are just focusing on the content which can fetch us more marks. So for example, this Sikh Confederacy here, Sikh Confederacy, the Sikh community in Punjab under leaders like Banda Singh Bahadur organized into a formidable force, challenging the Mughal rule and establishing their Khalsa rule. Now how we can write in the exam is like, suppose here we wrote Punjab here, and under Punjab what we will write, the name of the leader, right? So Banda Bahadur Singh, right? Banda Bahadur Singh, and what we will write, Khalsa rule, Khalsa rule. That's it. We will not be writing more than this. Why? Number of word limits, the space availability, and the time availability. So we will not be writing like this, but the content will remain the same. What we have to write about is Sikh Confederacy, Deccan Sultanate, etc. So Deccan Sultanate and the Sikh Confederacy and other powers that we will discuss, Hyderabad, Bengal, etc. So this is how we have to write, right? I hope you are able to understand. Or for example, if you want to write in some other manner, then you can write it like this also. You can write it like this emergence of regional power, for example. Emergence of regional power. And we can write like this, Punjab, and here we can write this Banda Bahadur Singh, Khalsa rule, like this, right? We can also explain in this particular manner as well, right? So this is your choice. We have already seen so many patterns. So pattern, use, select, and content, that should be like this. Right. Now coming back to the answer. So for example, here Deccan Sultanate. So Deccan region saw the rise of smaller sultanates like Bijapur, Golconda, and Ahmednagar, each asserting their independence and control, right? So we are giving the account of all regional powers that emerged from the Mughal, right? So this is one thing that we can understand. Now let's talk about other powers also. For example, for example, this Nizam of Hyderabad, right? So again, we are talking about different regional power. So it is about Hyderabad. Now, what you will write in your answer sheet is, in the Deccan, establishing a separate state of Hyderabad with significant autonomy. The Nizam emerged as dominant power. That's it. We will just be giving account of the fragmented polity. For example, the Nawab of Awadh. So Nawab of Awadh gained prominence in north central region. So when we are writing in exam, we have the liberty not to write like this, because see the repetition. Awadh Nawabs, the Nawabs of Awadh. So these things we can eliminate when we are going for these kind of presentation, right? When we are going for this kind of presentation, it is easy for us to write it like this, and in less number of words, less time also, and maybe more focused content can be there, right? For example, this Rajput state, when we say Rajput state in northern India, like Jaipur under the Kachwaha Rajputs became influential regional power, maintaining their autonomy. Now you see, we can neglect these things, right? Maintaining their autonomy, influential regional powers, because when we are writing about emergence of regional powers, these factors are already there. So we will not be writing all these factors. We will only be writing Rajput states, for example, Kachwaha Rajputs, and in northern India. That's it. In northern India, this Rajput states in northern India and Kachwaha Rajputs, for example. That is the thing that we can write. For example, like Jaipur. That's how we can write. Now let's talk about this. As you can see, next, the Bengal Suba, Mysore Kingdom. So Bengal Suba, once under Mughal control, became independent entirely, or became independent entity under its own Nawabs, significantly weakening Mughal authority in the region, right? So that's how we can give account to these factors also, right? Now, we can also write about Mysore Kingdom under Hyder Ali, right? Under Hyder Ali, under the rules like Hyder Ali, Tipu Sultan, etc., rose in prominence and challenged the authority of both the British as well as Mughals in South India. We can also talk about Maratha Confederacy. The Marathas, with their effective military tactics and leadership, expanded their dominion across Western and Central India, emerging as a significant regional power. Now, when I write this answer on answer sheet, I will not be writing these things, emerging as significant regional power or expanded their dominion. We can only write Western and Central India, the region Western and Central India, and we can write one reason, that is effective military tactics, right? This is how we can write. For example, when we are writing about Travancore Kingdom, the kingdom of Travancore, present day Kerala, so we can give some example, right? Present day Kerala, or we can write Travancore also, not an issue. Travancore influence and power, asserting autonomy in the southern region, right? And Bundela Rajputs, for example, Bundela Rajputs in Bundelkhand region of central India, establishing their own princely states, right? So these are the regional powers. Now we can conclude this answer. These regional powers, among others, played a crucial role in shaping fragmented political landscape mid 18th century. In mid 18th century India, right? Mid 18th century India, internal race of powers and succession, invasions and plunders from the northwestern region, and shrewd alliance of British and France played a greater role in feeding the cloud of fragmented polity. So in conclusion, we are giving one of the reason or this of this fragmented polity, right? In conclusion, we are giving one of the reason for fragmented polity. So this is the reason that we have given. This was the first question. So in this question, we had to discuss, we have to discuss the fragmented polity of 18th century. The main reason was the decline of Mughal and fragmented. That's why, if Mughal power is declining, that's why the regional powers started emerging, and we have given account of all those states which emerged mainly after the decline of Mughal, or maybe they were there. For example, like Maratha, they were present before the decline of Mughal also, but with decline of Mughal, they got the chance to assert their power more. They become more assertive, right? That's how we can write these answers. So this answer was not that difficult, but what you have written in your answers, maybe some people went on explaining the decline of Mughal, that was not required here, right? So be cautious with respect to those kind of misinterpretation of the question, right? Now let's come to second question. Now, important question. I hope if you are reading spectrum, etc., then you have directly seen this particular topic there. But how to represent in this exam, that is the different thing, right? So let's see. Let's discuss this particular question. The successor of East India Company depended on its capacity to mobilize greater resources than its rival. So they were better in mobilizing the resources. That is what we can understand here, right? Critically comment on this statement in the context of reason for the success of East India Company against its rivals, both Indian as well as Europeans, right? So we have to give the information about both the rivals, Indians as well as Europeans. Now let's understand this. First we have to give introduction. So introduction can be like giving information about East India Company, because we are talking about the success of East India Company. So introduction can be written for East India Company. The English East India Company was incorporated by Royal Charter and went on to act as part trade organization, part nation state, and reap vast profits from overseas trade with India, China, Persia, Indonesia. For more than 2 centuries they were having trades, and they got the benefit of it. But here if you want to write the dates etc, then also you can write the, for example, this Royal Charter date, you can write 31st December 1600, right? So this also 31st December 1600, this also we can write if you want to write. Otherwise keep it short, simple, eye catching. See, simplicity is required in introduction, but you have to present your point. For example, when you are trying to write answer for success of East India Company, let's give introduction of East India Company in the introduction part, right? This is how we can write answer, or we can start our introduction for this particular question. Now let's understand, we have to give account of both for Europeans and success over Europeans as well as success over their Indian rivals, right? So what we can write here is, number one, capacity to mobilize greater resources. Why they had capacity to mobilize greater resources? Monopoly and exclusive trading rights. So they were having monopoly and exclusive trading rights. Yes, we can use this one. This will get fade automatically, right? We can save time on this rubbing out. So monopoly and exclusive trading rights. For example, the East India Company was granted a royal charter giving its exclusive trading rights in the East Indies. This protected the company from domestic competition and provided a source of revenue for the crown. Now when we are writing this, either the one thing that we have understood is we will be representing in this manner only, right? All the reasons in this manner or this, these are the two most popular methods to represent our answer. We can keep on representing, keep on writing the reasons like this. But the content part, when we talk about content part, how we can write is, see, the East Indian Company was granted a royal charter giving exclusive trading rights. So when we have written this monopoly and exclusive trading rights, we will only write this particular point, this protected company from domestic competition. That's it. You have written this and then you have written this. This point is over, right? Because we have to save numbers. The number of words that I have used here is somewhere around 400, but we have to write in 150. So this is how we can use this. Only this much you will write. That much. This is the thing. This protected the company from domestic competition, or protection of company. This is a kind of protectionism that we see, right? So this is nothing that we can write. Other than that, joint stock model and capital pooling. So joint stock model and capital pooling, what we can write here is, by adopting the joint stock model, the company could raise substantial capital. So what we can write is, raise the substantial capital, we can write, enabling it to undertake ambitious and risky ventures that its competitor might not have been able to finance. So what we can write is, substantial capital, advantage of substantial capital over their competitors. That's it. And risky ventures, undertake ambitious risky ventures. So this is how we can write. So out of these 4 lines, we will be writing only 1 line, and this is how we will be representing this particular answer. Either this, or you can use this particular method, right? And then Battle of Plassey and Buxar. After Battle of Plassey in 1757, company get broad taxation powers in Bengal and transforming its focus from profitable trade to tax collection and empire building. So how we can write this? We will be using this Battle of Plassey and Buxar, and we will be writing this: company gained broad taxation powers and profitable trade to tax collection. That's it. This is how we can write, and we can save number of words, we can save time also, right? So there is no need to write complete answer, but this is how we can write. I hope it is fine. Now let's talk about other reasons also. For example, leadership. When we say when we see leadership, this is where the British were having advantage over Indian counterparts as well as European counterparts, right? This able leadership. When we talk about able leadership, the ECI armies were led by some of the best military minds. Now, Indian rulers were also having some of the best minds there, but second line of soldiers were not available. But in terms of British, they were having second line of soldiers also available, right? So this is the thing that we can write. For example, led by some of the best military minds of the time. For example, this Robert Clive, Warren Hastings, Cornwallis, etc. While the Indian side also had good leaders like Hyder, Tipu, etc., but they lacked a good string of secondary leaders. Secondary leaders string was not present in case of India, like ECI armies too, so they better mobilized their troops like during the Battle of Buxar. So we have to write, this was the important point that we have to understand. Indian rulers lacked good string of secondary leaders, as well as this is the point that we can talk about with respect to Indian rulers vis-a-vis the English or the British, right? Fine. Recruitment criteria that we can, for example, this about Indian soldiers, sepoys hired regular regiments of the British Army and funded its own navy and the Bombay Marine. The armies of princely states preference were given to the people of a particular caste, hierarchy, and personal relations with the rulers. Whereas in terms of East India Company, they hire troops in an objective manner based on merits, right? So we can write like this: hire troops in the objective manner based on merits. Whereas in India, they were mostly it was either hereditary or personal relation with rulers or particular caste people, right? This is how we can write on recruitment criteria. Also, we can talk about training. So better training was available to East India Company. The troops of East India Company troops were well trained by higher officials and British authorities, similar to the training given to the English troops back in England who fought in European wars. So they had the experience, the trainers who fought in these European wars. It made them maintain a high standard in the force. So obviously they were having high standard of force that we could see. Right? Fine. Now let's talk about this remunerations. Regular salaries were given to the soldiers and they were paid a little extra if they were stationed outside their presidency. But this was not the case in native rulers or Indian rulers. In princely state, payments were less, and sometimes because of economic hardships in the state, payments were not made to the troops, thus demotivating soldiers to fight for the territory. So this was also one of the reasons why people were not, soldiers were not that much motivated to fight for them, right? I hope this is clear now. Also, we can talk about type of weaponry. The troops of Indian rulers were armed, but their weaponry was outdated, right? So for Indian rulers, the weaponry were outdated, whereas EIC armies used modern guns and ammunitions which were more destructive in nature, right? This is how we can write. Now, coming back to this, further we can write some more advantage also, some more advantage or some more factors because of which the East India Company was having advantage. But even see, this was or for example, we can give this particular example also. If we can give example, that will enhance the quality of our answer. For example, this flintlock rifles, the EIC introduced its own pattern musket in 1764. Now we can talk about other factors also. Why other factors? Why I am giving the heading of other factors? Because if you have time, if you have number of words left, then you can incorporate this. Otherwise, no need to incorporate all other reasons also. We have already discussed 8 reasons. If you can formulate those 8 reasons better, and if you can present on the paper, then it is more than enough. Otherwise, we can write other factors also, because what I have seen in your answers is you have not used all the reasons that we have discussed so far. So some of the mixed reasons were there from these topics also. For example, alliance with Indian rulers. So British did alliance with Indian rulers, or they got this local support and resources. So company secured local support and resources by having alliance with Indian rulers. According to the Treaty of Bassein, the Peshwa accepted British paramountcy, which meant that he acknowledged the British as the supreme authority in India and agreed to be subservient to their rule. So that's why Treaty of Bassein is very important. That's why you will see lot many prelims question also asked on Treaty of Bassein, right? But when we are writing for mains, we can give the reference of it, right? Now we can talk about adaptability and diversification. The company's ability to adapt its business model, shifting from profitable trade to taxation and empire building, enable it to capitalize on changing circumstances and explore new avenues of growth. So what we can understand about this is this British were making right decisions with changing time. So how time changed, for example, from traders to tax collection to empire building. So they were choosing their moves very correctly, and they were evolving with time, right? Whereas their French, we will talk about this French here, Carnatic Wars, for example. The Carnatic Wars presented the company with an opportunity to engage in conflict with its European rival, and the French East India Company. The company successfully defeated the French and gained control over key trading centers in South India. So Carnatic War, because of Carnatic War, French lost their claim on Indian territories. Also, we can talk about this marriage alliance, right? Marriage alliance helped the British to acquire Bombay as a dowry when Charles married Portuguese princess. It also brought tacit peace between the two countries, right? So this is how British became powerful, right? British has what they have done basically here, in they have taken care of their rivals. Carnatic was taken care of French, marriage alliance taken care of Portuguese, right? And diplomacy also in Bengal through a flurry of negotiation. The British succeeded in getting permission to buy Sutnati, Gobindpur and Kalikata, right? So these were the regions which British got because of their diplomacy tactics. And later they made it Fort William, right? And become an important set of Eastern Presidency. This is one thing that we can. Now we have to conclude this answer first. So how we can conclude this answer? See, the company's ability to seize opportunities during this period of political turmoil significantly contributed to rise in a dominant force in India. However, it is crucial to recognize that these actions also led to expansion of British influence and control over Indian subcontinent at the expense of local autonomy and governance, right? So governance was having issues, but finally they managed and they emerged as an empire. So British Empire finally got established in India. Now third question that we can see here, the Indian society's impulse for social change. Now we are talking about the social reforms, right? Social reforms and social change. The Indian society impulse for social change reform was a response to its opposition to colonial rule. Now we have to explain this or examine this in 150 words and 10 marks. How we can examine this? Now let's understand from where the influence of British came. That can be our introduction. So this can be our introduction. After Charter Act of 1813, the introduction of Western education, Western lifestyle and thought slowly started creeping into Indian society. This ignited the movement or renaissance of this Indian society through reforms and rebellions. These reforms were largely a response of Indians to its opposite to colonial rule. Now this kind of introduction we have written. Now we can save some words here also, because it's 150 word question, so we can write from here to here, right? The Act of 1813 introduced this Western education, Western lifestyle, and thought slowly started creeping into Indian society. Only this much also we can give the introduction, and then we can talk about social change and reforms, a response to colonial rule. The question, the main part of the question that we can address here, right? For example, the rediscovery of reason and science. So why it was required in India to rediscover the science or rediscovery of reason and science? The British argued about the necessity of government intervention to liberate Indians from their religions, which they believed were full of superstition. So this was about British, right? This was about the intentions of British, that they had the intention to liberate Indians from their religions, which they believed were full of superstition, idolatry, and the tyranny of priests. This prompted the Indian reformers to rediscover reason and science in their own civilization, and then we started rediscovering this through social reforms, and many evil practices also we we try removing it. So reform is nothing but removing the things which are not required, and which are which can be evil of the society also. So that's how the things are. For example, this revival of India's glorious past. So why we started reviving this? Because the kind of civilizational threat we were having, because British were having this intention that we are having what the British were having intention that we are the backward people, backward civilization, and the kind of white man's burden theory, etc., was having that at that point of time. Now, coming back to this revival of India's glorious past, the social reformer tried to create a rationalist image of India's glorious Indian past. This can be seen as opposition to the British thought of civilizational argument for justifying colonial rule. So, British was having this. They gave this white man's burden theory that we are not a good civilization, and then they will control us. That is how they derive the authority also to colonize us, right? To colonize us, because we are not having that much good civilization, so they will civilize us. That's how they gave this particular theory, right? Now, coming to status of women. So status of women, as we can understand, was not very good at that point of time. So that's why social reformers, etc., tried giving status to women also. The Indian intelligentsia responded to the British critique about the low status of women and the social evils perpetuated on her by advocating and supporting reforms to improve the status of women in Indian society. So that's why you will see in reforming in this social reformers also played impetus or more emphasis on this alleviating the status of women in the society. Also, we can talk about Western education through the though the Indian intellectuals in general accepted the necessity of scientific and rational education, they opposed the trickle-down method and imposition of English education. Efforts were taken to promote vernacular language, press, and education. That we have seen with this Vernacular Press Act, what problems were caused. So that is also one of the problems. Now, translation of text. So translation of text also started in this reform period, and the scholars such as K.T. Tilang, V.N. Mandlik, and R.G. Bhandarkar, they translated the text to inculcate among the common citizens pride for their civilization, as well as eradicate the issues such as the caste system, prohibition of widow remarriage and child marriage, etc. So that is how from older texts they derive this, that it is not there, not present in older text, and maybe it is because of the kind of disfigure or the kind of customs that has been formed, and it is not from the text. Common consciousness, for example, several revolts and movements such as revolts of 1857 and the Swadeshi movement, etc., highlighted the need of self-reliance, cultural pride, and social cohesion, deriving the impulse for social change and reforms. So these are the factors that we can write about the common consciousness. For example, why the social reforms started picking up, right? This is the thing that we can write. Fine. Now, we can also discuss the challenge of economic exploitation. So the focus on economic self-sufficiency and the promotion of indigenous industries became a key component of the social reform agenda. So social reform agenda, more focus was on self-sufficiency and the promotion of indigenous industries, right? Now we can conclude this answer by saying that since these reforms were restricted to a small class of Western educated people, these were sometimes seen as an extension of the evangelist and missionary activities of the British. This generated a sense of opposition among the common people as they saw reforms as an invasion of their tradition. This is also one of the important thing that we have to understand, that these reforms sometimes perceived by common people as an invasion of their tradition. This restricted the scope of such reforms. Regardless of their restricted scope, of these reform movements played a very crucial role in shaping national movement against colonial, right? This is how we can conclude this. Now coming back to question number 4. Coming to question number 4, the next question that we can. The 1857 uprising was a culmination of the recurrent big and small local rebellions that had occurred in the preceding 100 years of British rule. We have to elucidate, right? So now we have to understand that this 1857 uprising was not the only, or was the culmination of many small and big uprising or rebellions that have taken place before 1857 also. But how to introduce this? So the introduction should be, again I will say, the introduction should be crisp in nature. To regard the 1857 rebellion or Sepoy Mutiny as a sudden revolt born out of frustration faced by soldiers and various sections of Indian society is not appropriate, right? So we are not saying that in 1857 it was born out of frustration. No, it is not like this. From the beginning of British rule, from 1757, after Battle of Plassey, of course, many small and big restorative rebellions, means the earlier one, right, where how the system existed before British, with various grievances and objectives took place. The culmination of all of which is a massive 1857 revolt. Now we have to give account of all the revolts which were the precursors of 1857 revolt. So how we can group those revolts? See, there were many revolts and many rebellions. How we can group those revolts? For example, when we talk about this recurrent rebellion in the preceding 100 years before 1857, because from 1757 British started exerting their power. So military revolts, then we will talk about civil rebellions separately. So we can group this. For example, here military revolts against Britishers. So when we talk about military revolts, we don't have to explain each and every revolt here. We have to be very selective, very choosy with respect to words. For example, Bengal Mutiny in 1764, due to lack of understanding among British officers regarding the Indian religious customs of the sepoys. We can also draw table. For example, here we can draw this mutiny, and here we can draw reasons, right? Mutiny and reasons for it. Bengal Mutiny, these are the reasons. Then Vellore Mutiny, this is the reason. This is how we can write, right? Because we don't have to explain mutiny, we just have to give account of these mutinies or these rebellions. The Vellore Mutiny in 1806 against the oppressive socio-religious policies of Britishers. Barakpur Mutiny of 1824, due to Britishers' intensity towards Indian cultural sentiments, caused greater resentment amongst sepoys, right? Then we can talk about civil. So this is all military revolts. Now we can talk about civil revolts also, or peasant movements also. Sannyasi Rebellion 1770, very famous, against the British prohibition on people visiting holy sites. Sannyasi revolted against the British, right? This is how we can. Sannyasi revolted against the British and were joined by other disgruntled groups like farmers or evicted landlords and disbanded troops. We can also talk about Paika Rebellion here. So Paika Rebellion in 1817 in Odisha took place against the land revenue policy of the British. Also we can talk about Polygars, right? Polygars revolt. The Polygars of Dindigul and Malabar rose up against the repressive land revenue system under the British. So this is all about the civilian uprisings, right? Civil revolt. Now we can also separately talk about tribal uprising. The British officials brought traders, moneylenders, zamindars, and merchants into tribal areas that resulted into the following rebellions, and we can give account of 2-3 tribal rebellions as well. For example, here uh, Pahadia rebellion or Chunar rebellion or Santhal rebellion, these are the examples. For example, due to expansion of British in the territory of Pahadia, or for example, we can talk about this deadly famines also due to enhanced land revenue demands, economic distress accompanied by deadly famines, or we can also talk about Santhal rebellion, that is started rebellion against Zamindar in the plains of Rajmahal Hills in the erstwhile Bihar. And now we have to conclude this. So all these localized resentments caused by local grievances gave way to major national impulse. This resentment against political subjugation, social stigmatization, and economic exploitation by the British was manifested in the revolt of 1857, the spark of which was provided by the soldiers. This is how we can write. So please don't misunderstand the question, and when you are writing the content, be very precise while writing the content, that how you can group these rebellions and how you can give account of one line, two lines, not more than two lines, because then you will not be having space as well as time to write the answer. Now coming to fifth question. Fifth question, important one. Critically examine how the introduction of Western education transformed India in unforeseen ways. So here what you can write, we can have two subheadings for this. First subheading, we can write why British introduced this Western education. So first, this can be grouped in two parts. In one first part of the answer, we can write the intended, what were the intention of British, right, and intended reasons. Second, we can talk about this transformation. So British were not hoping for transformation, right? Some positive impacts also came in favor of India. So for example, when people started learning, they got to know about the liberty, equality, etc., which was being practiced in British but not being practiced in India. Indians were deprived of it. So these things they learned, and then they started protesting against it, right? So these are the things that we can write. So we can what do here, when they say critically examine how introduction of Western education transformed India in unforeseen ways, first we will write about what were the intentions of British to introduce this education, and then we will be writing about what unforeseen ways or what unforeseen impact it created in Indian society or in that particular territory, right? So let's understand this. Now, let's understand how we can give introduction here. The British introduced a modern education system that aimed to produce a class of English educated Indians loyal to the colonial administration. So this was major objective. In other words of in the words of T.B. Macaulay himself, that we wanted a breed of Indians who is Indian, who will be Indians in blood and color, but English in taste, in opinions, in morals, and in intellect. They will be English, and only Indians in blood and color. This was the intention, as the quote of Macaulay we can have. Now, the expected impact of Western education by the British. What was the intention? What was the expected impact that the British were hoping for, right? So here we can write about boosting demands for English educated people would increase the demand for British goods. So we can write demand for British goods in the Indian market and thereby increasing imports. So this is how, again, I will tell you that this is how we can write, right? This is how we can give the reasons on paper, right? But as far as content is concerned, so this can be the content. For example, this cultural affinity to secure that elites of the society are closer to the British people, bred and practiced in British customs, would be loyal to the British interest, right? This was also one of the reason. Lower level appointments. So lower level appointments will be the English people will be there, and maybe translators. They can also help as translators. Recruitment of lower level clerical position for which employing Europeans was becoming very costly. The English educated Indians could also work as translators for negotiations with Indian state. So this was also one of the reason, right? Now we can also talk about the what kind of impact it created, right? What kind of impact it created. So this step of the British had the unintended consequence of promoting nationalism. So we will be talking about the promotion of nationalism because of this English education. Common language, so it provided common language and platform. The English language worked as a bridge between people from various geographies of India. This became platform for exchange of ideas, right? Then we can also talk about spread of modern ideas, right? The liberal values, for example, the Enlightenment ideas and the democratic values. So we can talk about this as well. We can also talk about for example, this Wood's Dispatch Act, right, with respect to education, emphasized the establishment of universities and institutions that promoted modern and scientific education. Formation of national consciousness. Western education helped in developing the shared national consciousness and pride in Indian heritage, leading to the rise of nationalist sentiments. For example, Swadeshi movement propagated the same ideas. Also, we can talk about a platform for political organization, or the birth of Indian National Congress in 1885 is also result of English education only. So it is because it was from educated class. Also, international movements, etc., we got to know because of this English education only. So exposure to international movements, Western education connected Indian intellectuals with global anti-colonial movements, inspiring them to seek independence and autonomy of India. Leaders like Jawaharlal Nehru and Mahatma Gandhi were influenced by international struggle of freedom, right? Struggle for freedom. And we can also write about role of press and media. Western education played a crucial role in nurturing a vibrant press and media culture in India. Newspapers and journals disseminated the information or nationalist ideas also, but creating public awareness and fostering a sense of unity among diverse Indian communities, right? This is what we can write about. Now, how we can conclude this answer? The introduction of Western education in India had far-reaching consequences. This played a pivotal role in fostering the national movement and creating a class of educated leaders who would fight for India's independence, right? This is the result. This was the result of English education only. Now, the last question that we can discuss today is this. It is a 15 marker question, so we have more number of words here. We have to write the answer in 250 words. I will be giving more words because when you will represent this on paper, then you will be having more options to cut down on certain contents, right? For example, we will not be writing in this paragraph format. Maybe we can draw some schematic diagram or maybe flowchart or mind map kind of thing, and we can explain the information that is required. Right now, let's see the question. How did the social reform and ideological struggles against the backward traditional elements and hegemony of colonial culture in the 19th century influence the emergence of distinct cultural identity of the national consciousness, right? So how we develop national consciousness and the distinct cultural identity because of the kind of reforms that were taking place, right? Now, how we can introduce this particular answer? So the nationalism and consciousness are long drawn process, right? That was culmination of various factors, but the most important two factors which help in the consolidation of a national identity were social reform mainly and ideological struggle against backward traditional elements and the hegemony of colonial culture, right? So now let's proceed with the answer. How these social reforms, ideological struggle against backward traditional elements led the national consciousness. Let's first understand this. Self-respect and pride. First, let's talk about self-respect and pride. The many reformers that we can see here, many reformers like Dayanand Saraswati, Swami Vivekananda upheld the Indian philosophy and culture. So this is giving self-respect and pride. This gave the self-confidence to the people in their national identity as Indians. Now, also, we can talk about participation of all sections. Why all sections? When social reform is being carried out, then we are not talking about the caste and other things, untouchables, etc., then all sections of society are participating. These social and religious reform movements arose among all communities of the Indian people. They worked for the abolition of caste, untouchability, social inequalities, and illiteracy. This helped improve their participation in the national movement and the development of national, right? This is what we can write. Now we can summarize this while writing in answer sheet. We can summarize, but this can be the content that should be present in the answer sheet, right? Promotion of modern education. The social religious movements encouraged the adoption of modern education, which exposed Indians to new ideas of humanism, democracy. For example, we can also talk about liberty, equality, right? So these were the idea which came to Indians, right? This helped in the development of national identity among the people. Also, with respect to Muslim participation, for example, Muslim reformers like Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, etc., who encouraged Muslim to adopt a modern education, right? A modern education where ignorance and irrationalism, which made them, so ignorance and irrationalism, which made them more inclusive and led to and acceptance of common cultural identity. Right, this is the thing that we can talk about. Encouraged Muslims to adopt modern education, right? Now, the emergence of regional organizations. So, many regional organizations also emerged even before establishing the Congress, right? Before the establishment of Congress in 1885, this Servants of Indian Society, or for example, this Indian National Association, and much more. Many other organizations were also there. So, emergence of these regional organizations, people were galvanized through these organizations. So, national identity was created among the people, right? This is the thing that we can understand, right? Now, more points we can write about religious superstitions and social obscurantism. For example, the social religious movement emancipated Indians from religious superstition, and the void created was fulfilled by the creation of new cultural identity as Indian. Because earlier we were having different identities. Now reform movement is doing what? Religious reform movement and other social movements, social reform movements, social and religious reform movements are doing what? Creating a kind of void, and that void can be filled by an Indian identity, right? This was one thing. Now, how hegemony of colonial culture led to the national consciousness. This is one, how we reformed, but there was external force also, and that external force is of British. So what role British played, that we have to understand. For example, number one, white supremacy. The opposition against British civilization theory and white supremacy galvanized Indians into a single unit and emergence of national consciousness, right? When they say that it is a white man burden, and they want to civilize us, we are not civilized, that united us, and that gave us the emergence of national consciousness. Second thing, we can also talk about Western education. So Western education brought new ideas of freedom, justice, rationality, and broad sense of unity among the Indians. Also, we can talk about economic deprivation. Reformers like, for example, Dada Bhai Nauroji, this drain of wealth theory, etc., they also played very important role in our understanding with respect to our economic interest, right? With respect to our economic interest. For example, presented the true picture of British being the reason for poverty in India and led to consolidation of the national movement and thought in Indians, right? Why? Because economic interest, right? Also, we can talk about the laws, when British came with the common laws, right? Because earlier we were having this old customs and all. So British came with common laws, and this also gave us the sense of unity, right? The British law, civil services, common legal system, and new means of communication unified the country and brought it under a common rule and help in bridging the cultural gaps among regions, right? This was one of the factor. And in fact, you can also talk about the railways, etc. That's why we have incorporated here the modes of communication. English education and press, the use of English language bridge the language and regional barriers, and the modern nationalistic press played a significant role in the development of patriotic ideas through the propagation of ideas under difficult circumstances, right? This is also one of the reasons. Discriminatory practices also this racial discrimination, economic, religious, and social reforms, and disruption of agriculture and industrial structure brought the people together under a regional national identity, right? So these are the factors. So there were two factors broadly which we can understand. One is reform and other is British hegemony. Then we can conclude this answer: this development of a common culture and national identity led to national movement and helps Indian National Congress develop strong collective mass movements. For example, this Swaraj movement, or non-cooperation movement, or civil disobedience movement, or Quit India movement, without the development of fissures and cracks in society at large, finally culminating into the independence of India, right? So this is how we can conclude this particular answer. I hope you must have got some idea, some skills we can get from this. Now, when I'm saying all these things, I am not telling you to write answer in this particular manner. You can write answer in this particular manner also. These are the reasons, and this is how we can draw the reasons, right? Or for example, in earlier cases, handwritten notes, what we have seen, like this we can represent the answer, right? It is not needed to write in paragraphs, right? So this is how we can understand that this was the idea. Now please understand the next we have finished modern history so far. Today was the last day of modern history. Now we will be moving ahead with the new subject, and the new subject will be economics, right? So from 1st of August we will be discussing Indian economy, and the new approach that we will follow to discuss Indian economy in this test or means program, or in this test answer writing program. So earlier this program was for only this syllabus means syllabus completion, right? Means syllabus completion and answer crafting. So this was the two facets of this particular program. Now what we are doing is we will be combining this with discussion plus discussion, as many of us are facing difficulty in covering the syllabus of economy. So what we will be having is, day wise we will be having schedule, and with respect to that schedule we will be discussing the topics, and then questions will be given to you next day, and then you will be writing on, right? So we will be having some sort of conceptual development first, maybe for 40 minutes or maybe 1 hour we can devote for this conceptual development, and then you can write answers. You can then read your resources, etc., right? So now this will not be a program now where you will be reading and writing answers, because since economy is a kind of little technical subject, first explanation will be given to you for some topics, and then you can read from your resource, and then you can start writing answers, right? So this is how we will proceed from 1st of August. The new batch also, we will be incorporating new batch, as we are starting with the new subject. So that's how new admissions can also be taken, right? So thank you very much. Take care. Bye bye.